Mark, are you regret not running for mayor? I'd like to start with one of those.
I guess a couple of days ago, Mayor Bigger in Sudbury announced he was dropping out of the race, and I read his response, actually, why it happened, and he talked about a lot of personal matters that his family were going through, and the importance of family. And boy, that's an important fact for me. I enjoy my private life. My wife and I try to travel as much as we possibly can. My daughter is up from Toronto today, actually, and we'll be at the meet and greet tonight. But the importance of family can't be underestimated. The mayor's job is a massive, full-time, tough job to do, and you can see what Al has gone through over those 3 terms of
some of it was self-inflicted, though.
Oh yeah, no, at times I look at it, Dave. A lot of people ask me whether or not I was considering. I'll be honest with you, I really looked at it, and there was a gut feeling I had. I also made promises to senior staff at DSSAB. I told them after the fact that there were so many things that we were working on, really good stuff, like solid stuff for the city. And I think I need to be back in that, in some position there, depending on how everything works out, to move a lot of those projects forward. So it was a tough decision.
Well, hold on a sec there. Peter Churko was saying that there's nothing been done, there's no plan, and he's going to save everything.
Holy mackerel, Dave! I mean, we've got.
I know there's
we've got a lot going on. The transitional housing development on Chippewa Street is. I would suspect at this point is probably going to be used by the province as a pattern across Northern Ontario. We've got 16 supportive housing opportunities in that building right now, which are full. I was just talking to staff yesterday afternoon about the non-supportive side. That's the part that you can see on the side of the highway. The only thing we're waiting for that 20 beds really are beds and curtains, and they were on back order. Once that's completed, the thought process is to move people from supported transitional housing to non-supported transitional housing. So when you start to look at the numbers, we're having a major impact on the whole system. But the crux of this whole matter is to be able to get people off the street, give them the actual supports. And I know we were wrong. Well, not wrong, but I know it wasn't in retrospect. And I always think about Monday morning quarterbacks, right? And I always look at these things and I say, well, was it right or was it wrong? At the time of the trailers and low barrier shelter operated by the crisis center, it was the only thing we could do. Like, there was nothing established here in the city. And I looked at what Dennis Chippa tried to do at the Gathering Place at night to provide support systems. Really wasn't working, and he tried hard. But the trailers were a temporary situation. What I didn't like about it was they basically come in one door at 8 o'clock at night, out the other door the next morning. So, I mean, I've said to staff, we can't do it that way. If we have people coming in and there's an opportunity to talk to them about whether or not they actually feel they need support or help, then this new project, it's phase 3 basically, will be open in 2023, probably, I hope January, February. That will again change the environment on the street and hopefully, have a major impact. But there are other things going on in the city. The Indigenous Center on Castle Street's a major move trying to solve those issues in the city. You've probably seen the Dr. McDougall project, which we put together over about a 4-year span, which is now an Indigenous hub. There's a lot more happening there with respect to development, what that development will look like. I'd like to tell you the story, but I can't quite yet about what we've tried to do there. But the bottom line in this whole problem inside the city really reverts back to the ability of people to be housed, and that's the issue. How do you do that? So the board, DSAB, our housing sector have been working hard to build up reserves, and we're going to have, once the Dr. McDougall site is sold, we'll have in excess of $10 million to put towards housing. And, we have plans here on Lakeshore Drive. Those were drawn up probably about 4 years ago that would look at 1 and 2 bedroom homes on top of commercial development across from Tim Hortons on Premier or on Lakeshore Drive. So all these little pieces and parts are fitting together, but the biggest single problem that we have, and I'm going to try and be nice here, but I was.
Don't pound the table too much, or sound thing here.
Yeah. I was. Oh yeah, no. I mean, I was tremendously upset with the.
Passionate.
Yeah, no, I was upset, Dave. I'll tell you. And we worked with Anthony Rhoda, Mark Saray from Sudbury. The rapid housing program that the federal government introduced, it didn't fly. 2 separate applications, a tremendous amount of work. Private sector involved in the 4 builds, 1 in Mattawa, 1 in Bonfield, 2 in the city of North Bay. All of the funding went to the larger centers in southern Ontario, except for 1 allotment of $6 million to Sudbury. So that was a major disappointment, and I've explained to Anthony, we've got to figure out how to make this work, because that is the underlying problem that we have. And you look at the cost of housing, construction costs. There's an awful lot of people that just can't make it, and that's very discouraging for me.
Well, that's the problem, because I know that there's an issue with people that have fallen through the cracks and are on the streets, but there's a big segment of the population that are under a lot of stress trying to make their living hand to mouth because of the pressures of the market with the lack of housing. Their pressures are increased because of the pricing and the competition for space.
Yep.
And I imagine it's hard to pay your hydro bills these days.
Yeah, I mean, I could share that. I probably shouldn't, but I'm going to share my experience with the North Bay Hydro Board, and that's a private sector organization.
Which should be public. I don't understand why we're hiding it.
Yeah, I agree. That's another issue. But 614 disconnect orders right now. That was as of last week, and we have to recognize what's going on in the community and the difficulties that we are actually facing, or people are facing,
Because that causes ripples right through the system, because now DSSAB has to help those people out through Lippy's busy doing that. Money's being allocated from other places, no doubt, just to try to bandage things when you know the problem and the cure. Or part of the cure, anyways.
And I had this, I called... On a side note, I called Scott Robertson. I asked him why he didn't run again. Because he was actually very, very important, I felt, at the DSAB board, because he brought a different perspective, and that's what you're always looking for inside those organizations. And his response back to me, and it's his call, but he just felt he didn't have the tools necessary to fix the problem, even though we knew that what the underlying problem in the city is. So,
well,
and
that's
he
an
worked
issue.
hard. Yeah.
Yeah, like, it was a hardworking guy, had a lot of potential, but
Yeah.
I think it's actually symbolic of people that are progressive and want to help and fix things, that they expect change too quickly. They want too much change at once, and then they get burnt out and disappointed, and they withdraw. Like, it's a tough thing if you don't have that staying power. I had him here for an interview, and there was no talking to him about incremental change. Like, he was looking at me like I'm an idiot. I said, well, it's not changing overnight, and you're talking about a revolution of
Yes,
society.
absolutely.
All right? And good luck with that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
my encouragement is, and people that are progressive and want to get in and make change, well, plan for 12 years of civic duty.
Yeah.
and
Oh,
and
yeah.
be happy with
Yeah.
the successes you can get, because
Yep.
it's a long haul. Anyways,
I can, you know.
hopefully he comes back.
I-
Hopefully he comes back.
I would hope he he does. He's a strong individual, and he's got some good thoughts, and maybe he will in the future. He's young, right? And that's a good part of it. And on that point, Dave, you know, I can't tell you how many ministerial meetings I've been involved in. You know, specifically over the last 4 years, because the other part of this whole game really is to be able to get to the ministers responsible and have some method. And you know, it's interesting, when I was dealing with a lot of the ministers at the provincial level, they always say to me, well, is Vic in favor? Right? Is Vic in favor? And my answer always is, right? Vic's always in favor. I mean, he's been tremendously supportive through this low barrier shelter change and all of that that's taken place. One of the things, though, that I do notice, I mean, from my viewpoint, when I look at what I do and what I'm involved in, there's a lot of things I may not be totally up to snuff on, because it's virtually impossible to keep track of it all.
Changes overnight.
Oh, and Vic has got a tremendous position inside the provincial government. I can tell you, we have lobbyists right now inside Queen's Park, both representing Cassellholme, and we have a lobbyist representing DSSAB, because my feeling is that we have to explain our situation, what's happening in our city or our organization, directly to the deputy minister, and that's where the decisions are made.
Yeah, you got to know what the halls of. Hey, Dave, do you mind closing that door for me?
Yep.
Thanks, man. You got to know which hallways to go down in Queen's Park, and you got to know the people, and they change. But the deputies often are the key, right? Because they have a lot of the responsibilities. The other guys are chasing, 5-second sound bites and other stuff, right?
Yeah.
And if you don't know the machinations of Queen's Park there, right, you're not going to get it done.
No, you're absolutely right. And perfect example is I really learned through the process at Cassellholme how that really works. We had tremendous lobbyists directly in the deputy minister's office all the time, talking to them about what we were trying to do there. And I firmly believe that project probably wouldn't have got off the ground without them. Yeah.
Well, there were some issues with that. I was rushed and untendered and whatnot too, eh?
Well, I think when you talk about the tender process, there was a tender process. So there were two individual companies that actually tendered on it. Percon, without question, was the best possible construction company that we could have ever gotten in that process. And they, even through the COVID situation, have stood strong on their budget. I don't know how they're doing it. I don't want to go down that road, Dave, because it's got to be pretty tough sledding trying to make that work. I know the project is about 3 months behind, and that's expected because there are all kinds of issues in the construction trades with materials and equipment and whatnot that are going on. But by and large, when you look at how organized they are on site, if you go over there and look at their organization, these guys know what they're doing, no question. And I can tell you from the board standpoint, even the last meeting, and I'll share a couple of tidbits if you want. We're 500,000 and change over. We had a $4 million backstop of extra money through the build. That overage is a direct result of 50-year-old plans underground that created some extra cost in the build. The footings and foundations of an old portion of the building were not shown. They had to be removed. Also, septic and fire water services weren't in the place that they were supposed to be in. So those things are being readjusted as we speak. And I want to talk a little bit about boards, how they interact with senior management, and what I've learned through this Cassellholme project. So we have a quantity surveyor. He is actually the liaison that works between the board, senior management at Cassellholme, and the general contractor. Every month we get a full documented report of what's going on the site, where the costs have gone, whether it's an add or it's a subtract, and it's happened both ways. This process that we've gone through by having an independent third evaluator inside the process is exactly the way we need to do major projects. And by doing them that way, we make sure that we protect the public purse, right? Because we know every month what's going on in there. If the expenditure is at a certain point larger than the quantity surveyor can actually handle, and sometimes there's small things, maybe $20,000 here for changes in cupboards or that sort of stuff it's going to happen. But if you've got major cost drivers inside the system, then the board is well aware that month what's going on inside the budget. So tremendously well run. I've learned a lot personally about, and I've been in the construction company process. I know how construction works, but I've learned a lot about these large projects, how you need to handle them, and how you avoid embarrassment. And that's one thing, from a board standpoint. I wouldn't want to see the board embarrassed.
Well, you learn from the project down the Chippewa Street.
Yeah,
Gardens.
that's that.
Let me re-clarify what I said about the tenders, because yes, there was a tender process for that. There was considerations or critiques that it wasn't the tender process that wasn't normally used, and it was bucked by the Association of Constructors. There was some, they didn't like the tender process.
Yeah.
You didn't get a lot of qualified tenders, right? So, but that's old news. I don't really care anymore. Mm-hmm. I just want to re-clarify that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. No, and that's fair, Dave.
It was considered a little sketchy. Yeah, but
yeah.
Turn the page.
Turn the page. Boy, I'll tell you, we, again, I learned an awful lot through that process, and it was a good learning process. Excellent people involved in it. Although, if you want to get into the
I'm going to have Jamie Lowry here on Tuesday. So
okay.
I'll
Jamie will really, yeah. I mean, the board worked hand in hand with him through that process, and the situation that was created with respect to governance. And I just want to add this, Dave. I think it's important to add it. My dad was the chair of Cassellholme probably for 25 years. And through that process, it was always the direction of the board that anyone that sat on that particular board was there for the seniors. There for the seniors. So when you go through the wrangling that you watch at City Council, that was never an issue over the last probably 30 or 35 years, where the board basically tried to do the best they could for that organization. But it went south, right? It went south because certain people inside City Council, number one, didn't understand the process. They instituted a situation where they gathered support from the outside townships that created further dissension. And that's why I mentioned to you about the lobbyist inside the deputy minister's office, because even the city of North Bay was writing letters, suggesting that the board, myself, Chris, other board members weren't doing due diligence in the process. And that was tremendously hurtful because I know I'm there for the right reason. I think a lot of people recognize I'm there for the right reason.
One of the questions I was going to ask Jamie,
yeah,
and I will, is the fact that the tender was awarded without the financial agreement really in place, and that it caused a sort of a leverage system, which actually, I saw that the city's position, which we're questioning whether or not they were thinking about the right things, but your board, the Cassellholme board, was in a position that forced the province to change its mind about who had to hold the debt. So actually, in a high-stakes poker game, it worked out for the city, right? That's what I saw. If you guys were actually planning that, it would have been brilliant, right? It would have been brilliant. It forced the province and Vic and those guys to withdraw the notion that the city should hold the province's side of the debt, which helped the city, right? So I saw it as a huge chess game, but you guys weren't on the same page, but you're heading in the right direction.
Yeah, I guess that's a good way of Monday morning when you look at it.
Oh, I love being the Monday morning comment. Yeah, that's my living, man.
Yeah, I know that. It's good, and when I look back at it, and we'll go a little further about where I think this needs to go, but when I look back on the whole process, it was disappointing that the target was the Cassellholme board. The target was not the Cassellholme board. We were doing our due diligence. The target was Infrastructure Ontario, right?
Yeah.
They required that guarantee.
Yeah.
So, and what you have to recognize here is that while all this debate was going on inside the city about Cassellholme and how it was established, and the suggestion the board wasn't operating properly, that there was all kinds of mistakes made in the tender process, Infrastructure Ontario are getting those news clippings, right? And they're looking at this and they're saying, what the hell is going on in North Bay? And I know that was going on because we were getting the feedback from our lobbyists saying, these are the problems that we're facing. At one point, the lobbyist said to us, Cassellholme will soldier on the way it is. And I thought to myself, no, that's not going to happen. We're gonna take this as far as we can. When you understand the Long-Term Care Act, we held the cards, Dave. We held the cards. Don't want to play in the sandbox? We'll force you to play in the sandbox so that we get this thing done. And I think, when Monday morning we look at it, right, we're in the right spot right now. We're in a really good spot. But I just wanted to, and Chris Main is certainly online with this, this thought process. Number one, the money hasn't had to come up front from the city of North Bay, right? We haven't had to draw a mortgage because we're in the construction phase for approximately 4 years. At the end of 4 years, then the financing, at that point, long-term money will kick in, and the municipalities at that point will have to ante up, depending on how they want to do it. But what's in the middle of this is the Long-Term Care Act and how municipalities, especially municipalities in Northern Ontario, can actually afford these costs. And we know, I think it was Derek Shuldren had talked about, I think it was only 2 provinces, Ontario and one other province inside Canada, that actually force their municipalities to ante up that 60-40 split. So what we need to do now is before that mortgage comes due, we need to say to the province, you're putting tremendous strain on the municipalities. We need you to come to the table. We need a 90-10 split, which would really alleviate, a lot of those problems. But I look at East Ferris, and I know they had a capital project, their medical center that they had on the books, and that it's now open now, I believe. In that process, they came out really on the right side of that because the province came to the table and provided the financing to make that work. So when you look at it Monday morning, we actually are in a pretty good spot, but that change in the Long-Term Care Act is really tremendously important.
I am wondering what kind of cluster of a situation we're going to have if we lose too many of the veteran councillors. Imagine if the QP's endorsement is a whole fresh new people in there that don't have the experience and knowledge. That there's a lot involved, right? Like that learning curve is huge to understand some of these things. I'm only scratching the surface as a quarterback on Monday, trying to figure out what's going on. But I understand that people. I just interviewed Mac, who I'm going to write a column where I'm going to suggest that some people go off to the pasture and be in a faux Senate and just get the hell out of the way for other people on council. And I had Mac as number one because he's been there for a long time. You don't hear about him much, right? And he just goes about his business. And I wasn't too sure. All the years I've always had fun poking him. But after sitting down, and he addressed some of the issues with a lot of background information that I wasn't aware of, that I wanted actually Peter to explain on a couple projects, that he actually had the background to say things, and I was impressed with him. I moved him off the Deadpool list. I told him that, and I'm putting him back into the C list for consideration of to balance out that need for. We're going to be in trouble if we're starting from scratch with a whole bunch of new people and a mayor that's got potentially, if Peter wins. It's not necessary that he will, but he has the front runner right now. He's got all these big plans to tear things apart, and you might end up with a council that don't know what they're doing. Is that scary?
Yeah, sure, it's scary. There's no question, Dave. I've talked to some of the people that, the new people running, trying to explain to them, what's really involved here. If you have young children and your meetings are constantly at 6 o'clock or 6:30 at night, and they go on until 9 or 10 o'clock at night, you're not seeing your children. That's difficult for young people to deal with. And perfect example is Sheldon Frechette, for example. He couldn't make the DSSAB board meetings, and He sat on that board, but yet never really attended. I think it was about 4 or 5 meetings he missed. Those types of situations, you have to realize if you're in the game and you want to understand it, you've got to be there. You can't float. There's no floating. Mac's got a tremendous amount of experience. I rely on him quite often at the DSAB level because of his understanding at the provincial level, and he has that position.
He has institutional knowledge.
Oh,
you
yeah.
have institutional knowledge.
Yeah.
A lot of the guys do. I know there's people that they just think that automatically somebody else can step in there. One of the reasons why I didn't decide to run for council
Yep.
is that I didn't have an 8-year commitment in my mind. Right? And it's an 8-year commitment to be able to be effective.
Yep.
I could have done 4,
Yep.
but one and done doesn't really do what I wanted to do. I could have contributed to a point, I thought, but I didn't have the commitment for an 8-year stint. And that's how I looked at it. Because your second term is when you're really effective.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
anybody that's running...
Depending on your position, right?
Yeah,
Because
depending on your position.
the first 3 people, basically, as chairs, whether it's general government or public works or it's community services, that carries a fair bit of weight. But I know there has to be changes made there. I know what the changes are, and I don't want to change direction here a little bit, but you get into that transparency issue that's just been huge, right? I almost think that might be one of the, if not the top, one of the top 3 issues that the general public are looking at.
Transparency?
Right.
For sure.
Yep.
Well, when we're talking about the structural changes for chairs and whatnot that are being proposed by different people,
Yep.
as I was discussing with a couple other candidates, I believe that council should be picking the best possible budget chief.
Yeah.
I think that there should be still a reward for people that the people pick to be the recipients of the most votes. I believe that that shouldn't be messed with too much. Because there should be that's the voice of the people to lead in key positions. I don't believe the mayor should be able to pick and choose who he wants as chairs.
No.
That's going to be dangerous.
No, that's not good.
Yeah.
And I'm, you watch the provincial government with this proposal whereby these mayors have sweeping powers. That's not in my books. That's not democracy, I don't believe.
Not in a town like
Yeah.
North Bay for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're going to have a lot of troubles.
Yeah.
And we should save those people that are thinking that way from what the issues are going to be that bite them in the ass when they get that, if they ever get that power, because that's undemocratic and that'll unravel. It'll unravel.
Oh, I mean, you look at budget chief, what the perception is, and you can provide a perception, I believe, for the public, but at the same time, you can provide a perception or direction for staff, right? You can do that. It's not something that's tough to do, and I'll give Peter credit for talking about, third-party review of departments. That was something I wanted to see done 8 years ago, right? That without question, because everybody gets measured. I get measured, right? In my position, I measure inside my small business. I do that all the time. What's so different in the public sector by not being able to measure the performance of departments against other municipalities, for example? And the BMA report is there. It's on the Sudbury website. That does.
I'm not against the third-party review.
Yep.
I don't think that's a bad idea. It
Yep.
depends on how that's used.
Yep.
I just don't want it seen another $1.2 million contract going to a consultant.
Well, so here's the difficult part of it. If you're budget chief and you're trying to go down that road, right, and you haven't done it. Yeah, it hasn't been done. I mean, we have audits, right, but the audits are provided figures from staff to an auditor who looks at them and gives a report to council, and that's the end of the day, right? but there's measurements, and I'll be, I've talked to some senior staff that are actually looking forward to that, because there's two sides to that coin. The coin can say, when that takes place, that look at these departments are operating really well.
Don't mess with them,
right? Don't touch them, right? That certainly could be something that transpires through it. And the other thing is, my personal preference is that that third party review is council controlled. It's easy to do. Appoint a committee. Put the committee together. It's very upfront. Anybody can listen to what's going on through the process. Appoint a third party through a tender process, and then the committee of council decides who gets it, right? And the committee of council receives that report back to a committee of council. That committee of council then presents it to council. That's the right way to do it. If you're open, transparent, and you understand what you're trying to gain from it.
Well, at the very least, if veteran councillors don't make it onto this council, they should be appointed to an oversight committee of some sort, as to get that, to retain that institutional knowledge within the municipality, because there's just so much thrown out with the baby with the bathwater when it comes to people.
You're absolutely right, Dave. I absolutely agree with you. There are some really good people in the city that have tremendous experience that you can gain understanding, and they're prepared to. They're
committed.
Yeah, they're not looking to get paid.
Yeah. And they're not going anywhere.
They're not going anywhere. They're supports inside the city. There should be more of that.
Even as a community is one of the things that I think that is lost and underrated. We have so many people that aren't in the public eye, aren't successful business people, but they have value. Seniors are undervalued. We don't have a system of allowing them to interact and take part and to, I'm not even sure how to say it, but we're not gleaning their life experiences, and they're not involved enough, I don't think. There's groups like that do great work, and volunteerism supports North Bay. It would be a terrible place if we didn't have these groups the heritage gardeners. But we have their energies are spent picking up the pieces and trying to do different things that are beneficial to the community. But they also have other knowledge and stuff to offer, as far as other things other than their volunteerism. They just have every one of the people that I interview have really good things to add, but they don't have a voice.
So you're absolutely right. If you watch the short-term rental process that went on, probably about 4 months ago, that was the perfect example, in my mind, of how committees need to work at council when there's an issue like that. So the opportunity for those people involved in that business to come to council and explain their position, right? And I know it's tough for some people to come forward to council, but when it's an open process at the committee level, providing that input to council really helped me, because I'll be honest with you, Dave, when I first looked at it, I thought, holy mackerel, more bureaucracy, more cost. Do we really need it? Well, those people involved in the business said, yes, we need it. To a certain extent, we need that. So that changed my perception of what needed to be happening at that particular moment. I still don't, and that's coming back to council probably in January, I believe. The rate schedule, it's $600. I mean, that's somebody's renting a room and has
Yeah, those people shouldn't have to pay that
Oh,
just to be
mackerel.
part of a system
No,
that's going to say they can do that.
That's not good enough. That's
There should be
that's a stretch.
a ceiling for when that $600 process even applies.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
Like
yeah.
you want to keep people from buying up a whole bunch of places and making that their business and they don't live here. They need to go through a process.
Right.
People that live here in
Right.
their homes renting out, they don't need to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Anyways, that's cool.
Yeah.
What other important elements of your platform going forward are reasons for people to vote for you again?
Well, obviously, I feel I've got a great deal of experience. I probably, maybe 30, 40 years of experience, because my dad was there for so many years, and I got to see how everything operates, and that certainly provided a major insight into how things operate. I like to think that I'm reasonable, right? I'll be honest with you, Dave, I work hard. I spend an awful lot of time at it. When I make a decision on something, I try to get as much information as possible on my my decision making process to make sure that I'm doing the right thing. Often, and this is where it gets really difficult, there'll be an item come to council on the agenda, the regular council meeting, that I think should have been in committee, right? We should have been at the committee level, bringing that forward and allowing people to talk to council about what they think needs to happen. That was lost through the last, there wasn't enough of that. I don't believe there. But then again, I talked about 3 positions and the influence they can carry back. And when I was chair of community services, my number one issue was always to meet with senior staff the day before the council meeting. And I would make sure I would go over, this is what my dad did years ago. He actually did it on Sundays, but go over the agenda, try and understand the staff reports and the validity of the report back to senior staff and say, I think we better have this on committee. Now that we have committee of a whole, there's a certain amount of power that's lost by committee chairs, because if you try to hold something back at the council table, once it's hit the council table, then the committee of a whole can basically override and say, no, we're going with that and we're moving on, right?
I wasn't a fan of the changes to the procedure bylaws.
No.
It gave definitely the perception that people had less voice. It changed how things operated on the committees, and it reduced the ability to slow up some of the decision making and the discussion, like you're saying. I think that definitely needs to be revisited.
There's no question. I mean, that's one of my basic platforms, and I had the discussion with the clerk the other day about it, and we had an individual specialist come in, and Fred Dean was his name, talking about procedures and how that works, and the comment was made, the 5-minute was withdrawn in the process under his thought that council would be blindsided by these 5-minute presentations. The chair of a committee, right, has an obligation. When an individual comes to speak to a committee, they put their process forward to committee. They're not there to question the committee members on their stance on that particular issue. That's not in the procedure. Really what it is to listen to the general public and understand what they're saying about a particular situation. The chair has to be strong in that to make sure that you stick to the rules of procedure. It's simple. It's not rocket science, and you can get around that blindsiding of particular members of council if you're strong enough in the chair's position. So there's ways of doing it. I would certainly be in favor of reinstituting the 5-minute procedure. We'll have to see what a bunch of other councillors feel about it, right? Because only one vote, Dave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we didn't get to the arena discussion, but I want to touch it about. I know there's a lot of background and pieces in play on the decisions. I know it's easy to just sort of say, no, don't do it. It doesn't make sense. It's designed poorly, location, blah, blah, blah. But there's no other plan going forward, but there's other things. So what other things should we consider on this arena situation?
Well, I would suggest at this particular point, and certainly from my position as chair of the arena committee, there was a lot of background information that was presented from staff, geotechnical, to the committee. And at that time, it was Derek Shulgren, Chris Main, Daryl Feinker was there for a period of time, and Mayor McDonald. We're all involved in that particular committee. So, we got all these geotechnical reports back talking about, for example, the site behind the arena, and the sheer fact that it would have cost an additional $6 million in structural costs just to get to the footing scenario. So, that was totally ruled out. There were a number of other reasons. You're in the inner core of the city. What happens to parking lots? How do you move traffic? Memorial Gardens is actually sitting on a piece of bedrock. That bedrock on the bottom side, the east side of Memorial Gardens, drops off, and it was swamp. I grew up next to that area, Dave. When we were doing the Cassellholme's announcement, I was telling, literally right where that is developed. I grew up there, so we used to have a skating rink next to our house. It was on the swamp that is now park, right?
Yep.
But anyways, that's kind of a sideline. But when we looked at that, the arena process at the Gardens, it was a no-go. It just didn't make financial sense. There were too many things that were in the middle of it. We did have presentations from the college, university. Basically at that particular point, it looked like there might be an opportunity on the Orsi property on that on the west end of the city. At the same time, I could see Nipissing Band being involved in that process on the west end of the city, because everybody's close there. It was basically left at that particular point that we would go back both to the university and college, and at the same time I'd like to involve Nipissing Band in the discussion to see if there was an opportunity to build something, probably on the Orsi property, some private public situation when Double Rinks is retired. That really was the thought process. So, could you do it in the downtown core? No.
How about West Fairshire? What are the real issues there?
Good. So, we looked at that. We had staff draw out a proposed site with a double pad and parking. That park would have been gone. We all know the importance of green space inside neighborhoods, the importance of that park, and I go back to the Tweedsmuir dispute a number of years ago when there was a proposed housing proposed on that particular property, and you saw what happened. I was there and people were angry, right? They were out, and I don't blame them. All these neighborhoods need green space. And I'd certainly thought about whether or not we could put a single pad there, what that would look like from a cost standpoint. We probably could build it without impact to the taxpayer. because there is some gas tax money that's available for that. Somewhere between $7 and $10 million would have made that work. But you get back to the situation of, does it make sense to do a single pad on that site where West Ferris is now, and whether or not it would make sense from an operational standpoint? It wouldn't. The economies of scale just won't make it work, because you basically have the same staff on a single pad as you would on a double pad. You had double the opportunity for revenue generation, where you only had one pad for single revenue. So the other opportunity, which I'll be honest with you, I favored, was North Bay Mall. When we went through that process, I was pushing senior staff at that point about basically a public-private opportunity that would see an arena built there, working with the lawyer in Barrie that owns North Bay Mall, and it made tons of sense. It was going to work. I could, from a size standpoint, we could have, shoehorned in the double pad where was new Popeye chicken and whatnot are at this point. At the same time, we know there's contamination issues with North Bay Chrysler property. That could have been used for additional parking. It just seemed like a really good fit when you're trying to recognize the opportunity of the arena and how that could complement the public or the private sector at North Bay Mall, all the restaurants and everything. The hotel's right handy there. The response I got back from the CAO at that particular time was, Mark, it would take 3 years to make that work. So
It'd be done by now.
Well, yeah, maybe. There was all kinds of pushback internally about that particular idea, and unfortunately,
Was it valid pushback? Because that's part of the problem. People think that they're wondering why city managers are making community decisions. They're not elected to do that. They're supposed to implement community decisions.
You're right. Yeah, dead on the money. They're dead on the money.
Yeah. So they might come out.
But at the same time, as an elected official, you have to have support trying to move that process forward. And it.
Okay, so let's skip over to the Trident design that's over there in Omichelle that doesn't make any sense to anybody, other than the fact that you spent $500,000 more to design something to save $5,000 in rock blasting. What the hell? Excuse me. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm in fairness, the arena committee never dealt with the design. We never dealt with the $2 million cost of realignment of Lakeshore Drive. That wasn't part of our
Well,
process.
who designed that anyways? Because I come down that road and who puts a road 50 feet to the right of where it's supposed to go?
Yeah. Well, that I guess it's it reverts back to engineering, and they would have had reasons for that.
I have to use that road lots, and I'm like, who did this?
Well, I think that probably the long-term plan was expansion of that particular road, and they would probably work that into the expansion. Who knows? Maybe there was an engineering mistake made. I haven't looked at that data.
I'd like to see what fly landed on the wrong spot of the engineering drawings to cause who couldn't see that alignment problem.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Okay, back to the design. I mean, I know it's and I've in the last while I've talked to staff about it, and they're still strong on the design.
Well, do they actually go to arenas for tournaments and stuff like that and events? Because if they ever did, they realize what's the idiocy of making people that go to an arena only being able to see one, and they're nowhere to sit in between. Like what?
Yeah.
I don't know.
So I'll just go back to when we finally landed on Omichelle, and one of the biggest governing factors was the rock, right? You've got rock there, even though Ferris struggles with flooding and low, poor soil quality. We had rock there. My thought process was we carve off the top of it, There's one little
One corner.
yeah, where there was a problem. That rock actually could have gone in there. We would build a box type arena like every other community is built. I think the one in Sault Ste. Marie is probably the pattern to follow. Quite a bit cheaper than what's being proposed here. I know right now for a fact that we're going to be 55 million, right? I know that for a fact.
For that design there
Yeah.
at this time. And
Yeah. So 55 million, you've got almost 27, in dollars from the feds. A little bit of a surplus there, I think.
minus the 5 or 10 million it costs to make it worthwhile that you can qualify for the 26. Yeah.
Well, you know what? And this is part of the problem, right? So, the council will have to go back. They'll have to go back, whether it's a committee of council or a special committee of council, has to go back to the plan at Omichelle, why it was done that way, whether or not it's feasible to do it that way, what were the reasons behind that particular design, and is there another opportunity on the property? Those are the things that you would have to start with. The other issues, in my mind, and I've said this to minor hockey, the Murph study, where are you as far as registration is concerned? Because COVID really, I know it caused a major problem. And, a bunch of kids have aged out of minor hockey. We know who they are.
Let's look at the demographics today going forward.
Yes.
And what are our real needs in this region?
Yes.
In this area.
Yes.
Because I know East Ferris Community Center, Wasson's Arena, and Trout Creek, and where we're going to put this. But I also understand the regional demographics fairly well. Are we really going to have young kids in the bubble coming forward? Are we?
I don't know, Dave.
In organized hockey and other sports that use ice?
A committee of council is going to have to look at that again and say, okay, where are you? Now, I received a questionnaire from minor hockey last week, and they asked me if I would
Sport North Bay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Asked me if I would support reduced rink rentals, right?
Yeah.
So that's telling me that they're having probably problems with registration. If you're paying AAA, I think the last number was like $6,000 a year for a kid to play hockey. I mean, how do you afford that? I don't know.
It's an expensive sport.
So,
and that's just the tip of it.
Yeah.
You got to go follow your kid around to all these tournaments. That's one of the first places where people are going to make decisions based on inflationary pressures.
Absolutely.
For raising their kid.
Yeah.
House league hockey is great. It leads people to want to do more, AAA and whatnot. But the only thing that is really affordable is house league. But they can't afford $200 an hour ice. Right? So, you got to really, Sport North Bay and the city really have to take a real hard look.
Absolutely, Dave. Without question, I certainly agree with that. And,
And you know what's going to solve the problem? Make them use wood sticks up until H8.
But anyways, I mean, there's more to it again.
Oh, yeah,
And one thing that happened, and I talked to a couple of counselors about this. We're going through the budget process, and the arena process was on the last page of the budget. It never got discussed at our budget meetings. It never was discussed at our budget meetings. And I turned a page and I looked at it and I thought, well, I'm sure we're going to discuss this, but it never came out. And I went back to a couple of counselors and they went, oh, geez, yeah, we didn't discuss the arena during the budget deliberation. So I
thought that was by design. I thought you guys were
sure
just skipping over a wart, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely it was. Anyways, getting back.
None of this stuff is cut and dry. That's basically
No, there's too many steps that we need to follow to get to that point. It's hard stuff. You look at you look at Cassellholme, what went on there, and the process, and making sure that you do it the right way and follow some sort of pattern, and then I've got to go back to the public and say why I didn't support it or why I supported the situation. And I'm not there, Dave. I'm going to be right out here. I'm not at this point. Based on the number of questions that are involved there, I can't support something like that. You got to be careful that you don't set yourself up for a blank check. And when you're dealing with public funds, that's, your number one importance. You better make sure you got it figured.
Okay, we got one last thing.
Yep.
What do you want to make it? I'm going to comment on what you think is important, and then we're going to wrap it up.
Yeah, sure. From a municipal election, I can tell you I've been just tremendously busy trying to deal with all these different things that are happening in the city, and I'm extremely concerned about the inflationary trends, whether or not a lot of people can make ends meet, what kind of situation is going to drive the city budget at this point. I've come out and said zero. You have to start somewhere, right? You have a take price, or you have a wish price, and you have a take price in the process. How that unfolds when we look at this inflationary situation, and I look at the support staff inside the school system looking for 11.7% increases. That's just not going to happen. And I said this at the table with the Labor Council. Somehow, somebody has got to recognize where we are at this point, and we need to put the brakes on cost. And this next council will have a hell of a job ahead of it. Really tough job, tough decisions. People will be impacted, but I know I have the experience. I know I'm in the right place at this point, so we'll see how it works out. But that's my real biggest concern.
Well, that is the reality. The next term of council, no matter who gets elected, they gotta wrestle an elephant and a lion at the same time.
Wow.
So
tricky.
Hopefully there's the right mix of people that are able to rationally take a look at the pragmatic approach to go forward.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Lots of improvement, lots of work to do.
And there's a lot going on that's already happening too. And people need to catch up to speed.
Yeah.
Right?
You're absolutely right. Yeah.
Maybe you guys need another communications officer. And that's not me. I'm not saying I want the job, but you guys got a lot of communication that needs to be done through the city. And I think communication solves a lot of the issues. You have to tackle the things that are embarrassing with facts.
Yeah.
Right? And you got to, so good luck with that.
Yeah, and to that point, Dave, an opportunity to speak candidly back and forth with you about a whole bunch of things that are going on, and kind of set the record straight about what's gone on in the past. And but I still maintain, and I have an open door process that I use with the press. I've probably been on Cogeco and MCTV and all those facilities a number of times over the last term, trying to explain to the public what's really happening. And I think we're soft. We don't have enough media exposure in the public, and that's why I try to make myself available as much as possible.
I think one hint for everybody that's dealing with media and politicians and the city staff, managers, whatnot. No matter, every time, for example, when I write a column, that's an invitation for people to set the record straight.
Yeah.
I'm poking the bear because I want a reaction and I want to either be corrected or I want somebody to try to explain what I'm raising as a question, because I'm telling you people are talking about it.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you my opinion on it based on my limited knowledge. And if the people don't react to it and just want to ignore it because it isn't perfectly explained in their situation, they're losing an opportunity.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. Every time I throw the ball up there, if you don't swing, you miss the opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, good stuff, Dave. Thank you.
Always good
Appreciate
talking to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.